If you saw episode 4 of my art therapy series where I made this woven art and thought, I want to try this too, this tutorial is for you. I'll show you step by step how I made it from preparing the canvas to securing the threads. So let's start. First, you need to prepare the canvas. I painted mine in the same color I wanted my warp to be. In my case, that was white, but feel free to pick any color you like. I use acrylic paint for this because it dries relatively quickly. Once the paint is completely dry, you can add double-sided tape. I applied it to the back of the canvas and pressed it firmly to make sure it was properly attached. Now, you need to measure the thread that will become your warp. If you're not familiar with the terminology, the warp is the vertical thread in a woven fabric, while the weft is the horizontal thread that you wave through it. For my warp and weft, I used macram cord. I separated the cord into its individual components, which gave me 45 single threads. Once all the threads are separated, I peel off about 1 centimeter of the protective backing from the double-side tape on one side and started attaching the individual threads. I placed them about 1 millimeter apart from each other. Once I have this first centimeter attached, I move the threads over to the other side. I make sure they're running parallel to each other and aren't tangled or loose, and then I attach them to the tape on the other side. And then I just repeat this centimeter by centimeter or inch by inch, depending on which measurement system you use, until the whole canvas is covered. Once the warp is ready, evenly distributed, and properly tensioned, you can move on to the weft. For this, I choose a second color. In my case, it was mocha. Again, you need to measure how much thread you need across the canvas, keeping in mind the shape you want to create. Then, separate the cord into individual threads. To make weaving the weft through the warp easier, you'll need a needle. I recommend a needle used for cross-stitching because it has a rounded tip, so it's less likely to catch or pierce the warp threads, the canvas, or your fingers. And there is no need to make a knot at the end of the thread. Just make sure you leave enough loose threads on both sides so you can secure it later on the back of the canvas just like you did with the warp. And now you can finally start weaving. The first 2 rows are the most important because all the following rows will follow the same pattern. The weft thread needs to go over every second warp thread. So for the first row, you go over the first warp thread, under the second, over the third, under the fourth, and so on. For the second row, you do the opposite. Under the first rope thread, over the second, under the third, over the fourth, and so on. Then you simply repeat those 2 rows alternately. Another way to make it easier to remember is odd-numbered rows go over the odd-numbered warp threads and under the even-numbered ones. Even-numbered rows go over the even-numbered warp threads and under the odd-numbered ones. This creates a basic, stable woven structure that won't simply fall apart even when you remove it from the canvas. But you don't actually want to do that. Now that you know how the basic pattern works, you can start thinking about what you want your design to look like. When I was making mine, I was thinking about ocean waves. But after I posted the finished piece, many of you told me you could see a flock of migrating birds in it. And honestly, I'm almost certain that if I had started with the intention of creating birds, it probably wouldn't have looked like migrating birds at all. So my advice is, let your instincts guide you. If you need a bit more of a plan, there is one thing you can keep in mind. When you bunch the threads closer together, you can create the impression of a fold or indentation. When you keep them farther apart, you can create more of a raised or convex effect. Just remember, This is supposed to be a relaxing activity. Try to enjoy the process rather than worrying about getting everything perfect. And if you don't like what you've done, you can always unravel a few rows and try again. At one point, I decided I need to mark the shape of the bottom part of my design so I could see where I wanted the composition to go. Also, I had quite a few questions from you about what I used to guide the weft thread. It's actually a Cricut Whittler tool. If you want exactly the same one, you can find it in my Amazon shop through the link in my bio. I've also linked the other products I've used for this and some other of my projects. But honestly, you don't need this exact tool. Anything with a thin, pointed end should work. Even a second, slightly larger needle would do the job. Once you're happy with your design, turn the canvas over. Apply some double-sided tape where you have the loose ends of the weft threads. Then, secure each thread individually to the tape. Once they all secured, trim off the loose ends sticking out beyond the frame. For some extra security, I also covered both the weft and warp threads with washi tape. And that's it! Your woven art is ready to be framed and hung on the wall. I hope this tutorial was helpful. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to leave them in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more crafty ideas and tutorials.